How did you come to this role?
I, my father had 20 children.
20.
Yeah. And we're actually 18 right now, having lost 2 adult children. I was the very first one to get a university degree only because I was doing sports during my primary and secondary. Well, in God's providence, I came to Kampala to try and find a scholarship in a university. Between that period is when I connected with First Praise, the church where I go, and so they preached the gospel to me. I got saved, and I have been part of that church since then. There is a special value I put to education, and I can see how God has used my education, to advance His kingdom. And this is what I want to continue doing for the rest of my life, building capacity and helping those children be able to get an education.
Are you a hardworking dad, juggling family responsibilities while dreaming of building wealth through real estate? Welcome to the Invested Fathers Podcast, where we explore how to balance investing and fatherhood. I'm your host, Kenny Johnson, founder of East West Capital. Over the past 5 years, I've been buying real estate to free up my time and secure my family's future. Now I'm here to help you do the same. Join me as we navigate the real estate world together, building wealth and strengthening our families. As my grandma always said, East-West, home's best. I had the privilege of sitting down with Noel Thomas this week during my Wednesday men's journey group at my church. And Thomas is from Uganda. He's 42 years old, and he gave us really his testimony of how he came to be where he was at as a Christian and his mission. He is really leading a charge right now on an organization called Schools Not Streets in Uganda. This is a global group. They're all about pulling kids off the streets and putting them in schools. Wow, what an eye-opener meeting with Thomas this week. He's just visiting a few churches. Like I said, I've been supporting him, and it was so cool to sit in a room with him. This guy is a warrior, and I thought it was fitting to talk about Thomas and Schools Not Streets on this episode today. Invested fathers, we're really trying to give our kids best childhood we can give them, love our wives, be good men of God, just be a good example and a good citizen, good neighbor. We haven't talked too much about missions and being givers and tithing and being part of the kingdom in other parts of the world. I wanted to share my heart on that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to read from the website of the Schools Not Streets and give you guys who they are. Turn your attention to what that organization is. And if anyone has the abilities or interest in supporting this group, they have been vetted. It is a safe group to invest into and to give to. I think when people talk about what I've been told is if you talk about giving money to people in Africa, there's huge skepticism in the dishonesty of how that money actually gets spent. And I met with actually 2 different pastor type individuals who are very involved on the board of this group. And they have given it their highest remarks in regards to it being a genuine group that is helping impact the lives of kids on the streets in Uganda. I'm going to go to the website real quick. Let's see here. Schoolsnotstreets.org. So it starts by saying, "Uncle, give me something to eat." No matter which developing city you live in, you are likely to experience this on the streets. From Odessa in Ukraine to Kisumu in Kenya to Kampala in Uganda, millions of street-connected children across the world are abandoned and left to fend for themselves, where they face high risks of abuse, trafficking, unsafe migration, labor exploitation, drugs, domestic violence, and sexual abuse. The lives of these children are characterized by lack of medical care, no education, hazardous jobs, and deplorable living conditions. Just like any child, these children should be in school and enjoying stability and protection. This is the mission of Schools Not Streets Global. While there are many factors, poverty and lack of sustainable access to decent education have been identified as the major factors in the increase in the number of street children. Our mission is to provide stable education for these children in a loving environment. We work with local faith based organizations and local governments to construct home setting boarding schools, furnish them, and staff them. We operate them for 3 years, preparing them to be self sustaining before transferring them to a local partner to operate for decades to come. And there's some more in the website that actually talked about their model. Talking with Thomas, I think what I was struck with was the extreme amount of energy required to have people like Thomas get these things done. I think there's almost a rolling of the eyes and lack of hope to think of Americans and in the workforce today. And I hope I'm wrong on this, but it seems like no one wants to work anymore. The future generations are TikTokers and Instagrammers, and they're building their sort of virtual kingdom here. Whereas the labor force of contractors and workers seem to be dwindling or not showing up to work. I think we saw that at COVID, where people just didn't come back to work after some of these things got shut down. So the idea of someone in Uganda trying to instill this uphill battle of building these schools and helping these kids just seems overly daunting. I think what I also was struck with was the joy that was coming from Thomas. And you could see the tiredness when he was talking sometimes, but he has said you won't find really happier, joyful people than people in Uganda. What a conviction in light of all of the things that we have here, and hearing that there's joy coming from people and families that just have very little, if not anything. I watched like a 2-minute video on this website or on this website, Schools Not Streets, and it just shows the kids and they're playing at the playground and they're playing with some of the missionaries and stuff. And I experienced some of that in Brazil. I was on a mission trip to Brazil back in college, and just a great perspective shift that our world doesn't end in the state that we're in right now. And it's very good for us as Christians, as dads, human beings, to just recognize that, number one, we have a God who is very big to create all sorts of different places and people and care for us all. And then number two, we're just a speck in light of eternity. And if we're the center of our own world, we got to wake up and start thinking about other things going on. People like Thomas who are working hard. I took some videos and some pictures with him. I'm going to try to get those posted on my social medias here next couple days. But pray for Thomas, pray for Schools Not Streets, pray for God to work in your own heart to be open to things like this. Maybe it's not this specific organization, but if your church has something that's a local mission group, international type of thing, we're on the mission field all the time. You know, we're in the mission field in our families, but our neighborhoods, all those things matter. You don't necessarily have to go to Uganda to feel like you're part of God's mission and ministry. But just a really cool thing that I wanted to start the episode with. Today's episode is going to be pretty short. I wanted to touch base on the Intentional Father book. And the two chapters that I wanted to highlight were titled Self-Discovery. And the second chapter that I read was Arc of Life. The self-discovery chapter highlights the idea of not creating your son in your own image, but really figuring out how can you bring out who your son is, guide him in what it is to be a man, but also understand that he is different from you. And how can you make that the best version of him that he can be? The topic of identity, I know, is a buzzword in today's culture. I think there is a identity that we have in Christ. That's the simplest way for me to put it. Who was Christ? And the book definitely resonates that Christ was the perfect man. So if you're looking at how to be the best man ever, just look at how Christ was. There's no other perfect example other than that. It talks about taking personality tests, Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, and I'm actually doing that right now. I'm working with a life coach. I mentioned that, I think, last week. And part of it was finding your voice. There's these 100-question tests of like situations. I would encourage you all, if that's not something that you've done yet in your life, it might be very helpful for you to have some understanding of who you are in personality wise. So that when you go into a job interview or you're having a meeting with somebody or you're in some type of team organization, might be really helpful to just maybe in opening introduction say, hey, I took this test and this is how I'm wired. And let that be something that you maybe can lead with so that those around, if they have familiarized themselves with some of the terms and ratings, numbers of these personality tests, you guys can sync up very quickly and understand how you guys think and operate and use those self-awareness knowledge to fast track gelling as a team. If we were all built the exact same way, we'd be in trouble. So having different strengths and different ways that we're wired hopefully give us the best chance of being effective in those team environments. The other chapter I wanted to highlight was Arc of Life. And this was really interesting to me because the author goes through sort of the high school through 90 years old. Basically, every 10 years, he has some type of description of what that decade is about. So let me just read them real quick. He said high school was a time of not saying no, but experiencing new things. College was about learning. And he goes a little more detail. I'm just going to give high level, like kind of one word things. The 20s was about growing. 30, editing and shutting off or pruning parts of your life that you're not happy with. 40 would be mastering. Your 50s are about harvesting things that you've invested into and reaping that harvest. 60s would be guiding, maybe like mentoring someone younger. 70s are about imparting, so like passing on and leaving that legacy. 80 would be about savoring, and your 90s are about preparing for the finish line and going to be in heaven. And the point of kind of highlighting these different ages is he said that he had his son interview with like questions and have conversations with someone in each stage of this time. And he said some were, more fruitful than others, but I think there is definitely a sense of looking at a life holistically in all those stages and at least being aware of time and its fleetingness and its preciousness, its limitations to make good use of whatever stage you're in. So my takeaways for you all is if you have children that would be applicable to having, number one, some type of self-awareness test to maybe consider doing that. There's probably some things online that we could find. He mentioned some that were like $10. Might be a good use of $10 to do that with your kid. And then two, just being able to have more conversations with people at different stages. My son is 8. He has a few connections that are older cousins who are in their teens. I don't think he knows a lot of college people right now. Of course, there's grandma and grandpa. He definitely isn't hitting all these different arcs, but that might be something that we can intentionally try to do in just understanding different stages of life. All right, that's all going to be today. Guys, thank you so much. And I always try to encourage my listeners in these like one-on-one talks. Being a dad can feel like you're in the trenches or you're a lone wolf trying to figure this out. My dear mother-in-law sends me these reels from Instagram or Facebook about dad stuff. And there's been really some cool encouragements I've received from different dad podcasts. And as I go down this dad parenting, influencing type of role in connecting with you out there. And there are so many special moments to be shared as a dad. We're on a video game fast right now, and my son is starting. I'm somewhat forcing my son to read new books, Hardy Boys, choose your own adventure kind of stuff. He loves comic book type of books right now, but it's been really cool to see him expanding into new things. It's always hard in the beginning, but then once he starts doing something, I see him latching on. That's been special for me this week. And my daughter, who I haven't talked about too much because this intentional father talks a lot about the son and bringing your son to manhood, but my daughter is becoming much more vocal in feelings, in loving mom, loving dad, and you're the best mom and you're the best mom in the world. And she's been really sweet recently with some of her words. So she's turning a corner in that way. She's always been a little bit of a wild child, much more expressive in anger and yelling than Moses was. Those are some special moments that I've been able to share. And I just want you guys to be encouraged, enjoy the moments, choose to go the extra mile, and give your kids the best of you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Invested Fathers Podcast. If you liked this episode, we would love for you to click subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. We appreciate all of your hard work as a father and look forward to our next episode together.